The final few New Austin missions in Red Dead Redemption are always enjoyable to me, like our last character introductions leading into our Avengers moment before heading south of the border for Phase 2. But one of the most interesting parts for me, of course, is the history. With each new mission comes new historical connections. I'd like to explore a few more. So let's take a look at the real history of Red Dead Redemption.
Yes, boyo, you messed up properly this time, didn't you? You little Paddy bastard!
Welsh isn't the only one to give Irish this nickname.
This Paddy bastard stole our gun.
Paddy is, of course, a nickname for Patrick, and St. Patrick, of course, is the primary patron saint of Ireland. So eventually, the nickname began to be applied to Irish people generally. And as obviously intended here, it took on an offensive and derogatory tone, especially as Irish people travelled to the United States around the 19th century. After John deals with these men, Irish tells him a little more about them.
We all met on the boat over a few years back, we did. Thick as thieves ever since.
One meaning of thick is to be close, intimate, or familiar, hence this phrase. Some have also used the term as thick as three in a bed, and others as thick as inkle weavers. The first usage of thick as thieves, meanwhile, appears to be around 1833, in an explicitly proverbial way, describing thieves as being close to one another, knowing each other's secrets, and laying their heads together to do all the mischief they can. Unsurprisingly, Irish makes a promise to John that he does not keep.
I'll cover you from the ridge. I'm better from long range. It'll be a piece of cake, fella.
It's not confidently known where the phrase piece of cake comes from. Some suspect it comes from the same place as takes the cake, which is cakewalk, now referring to something being easy. A cakewalk is a type of dance said to have originated in the slave quarters of southern plantations. Dancers would adorn nice clothes and dance like the white elites, an opportunity for slaves to ridicule their tyrannical owners. White people, unaware of the mocking nature behind it, took a liking to the dance and introduced it as a regular routine in minstrel shows by around the middle of the 19th century. In the next mission for the Marshal, John helps him and Drew MacFarlane get Bonnie back from a group of outlaws.
This is the land of opportunity, mister!
This phrase, of course, is an extension of the American dream, the idea that the United States was the place where people came to live a better life, live their dreams, and take advantage of their opportunities. It was beginning to be used more widely around this time, especially in relation to specific properties, counties, and states. On their way to help Bonnie, John and the Marshal speak about the federal government.
I agree with you. Wolves in sheep clothing.
This phrase seemingly originated from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, recounted in Matthew 7:15 in the New Testament. Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but within are ravening wolves. John ultimately saves Bonnie from the bandits in Tumbleweed, once a thriving, bustling town, now a ghost town, due largely to the fact that the railroad bypassed it entirely. While not an exact match, a similar town, also mentioned earlier in relation to Armadillo, is Tombstone, Arizona. It was one of the last boom towns. Its population exploded in the 1880s, from 6,000 in 1881 to at least around 10,000 by 1885. Before long though, the prosperous mines flooded. Attempts to pump them were made, but they eventually closed. 2/3 of the population left. By 1890, there were fewer than 2,000 residents. By 1900, there were fewer than 700. Were it not for cultural depictions and subsequent tourism, Tombstone may have become a ghost town as well. There are several other communities and ghost towns that were also mostly or entirely abandoned as a result of railroads bypassing them, like Boggy Depot, Oklahoma. Founded by the Chickasaw and Choctaw in 1837, the railway bypassed the town in 1872, prompting many to relocate. There's also Forestville, Minnesota, settled in the 1850s and bypassed in 1868, and Leipzig, North Dakota, settled in the 1840s, largely by Eastern Europeans, who named it after the German city. It was bypassed in 1910, prompting residents to move southwest and found a new settlement, New Leipzig. The next mission for Irish is called Man is Born Unto Trouble, a reference to Job 5:7. Yet man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward. En route to their destination, Irish drunkenly begins to sing.
I love me faithless Flora, the lily of the west.
Lily of the West is a traditional folk song dating to at least the 19th century. It's often associated with England and Ireland, as well as Canada and the United States, so its inclusion here is unsurprising. The lyrics are about a man who falls in love with a woman whose name, according to some versions, is Flora, who he catches being unfaithful to him, hence Faithless Flora. Several versions of the song have been recorded, perhaps most notably by Joan Baez in 1961 and Bob Dylan in 1970. In this mission, Irish continues to promise John that he can get him a gun.
Apparently, they got it stashed up at Gaptooth Breach.
In the game, Gaptooth Breach is an area within Gaptooth Ridge, which appears to be based on areas in the southwestern United States, especially Southern California and its Joshua Tree National Park and Mojave Desert. This seems particularly evident through the terrain and the presence of Joshua trees, which are native to the southwest. The presence of a mine here is unsurprising too. There were about 300 mines in the Joshua Tree National Park region, though most were unsuccessful. One of them, the Lost Horse Mine, produced approximately 16,000 ounces of silver and 10,000 ounces of gold between 1894 and 1931. Other regions throughout the game appear to be similarly inspired by real American deserts. For example, further west in New Austin, around Armadillo, could be inspired by the neighboring Sonoran Desert, particularly evident by the prevalence of saguaros, which are native to the Sonoran Desert. Rio Bravo, meanwhile, also the name of several real-life areas, including the river known in the US as the Rio Grande, has a bit of both of these deserts, as well as some of the Chihuahuan Desert in northern Mexico and the southwestern United States. John, of course, has more missions with Nigel West Dickens, including one called Can a Swindler Change His Spots?, a reference to the saying that a leopard can't change its spots, implying that one cannot change who they are. This itself dates as far back as Jeremiah 13:23. Can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? In this mission, John meets Dickens in Plainview, likely a reference to Daniel Plainview, the oil baron and tycoon protagonist of Paul Thomas Anderson's 2007 film There Will Be Blood. In the game, Plainview is the site of an oil drilling project. Oil wells were certainly in operation by this time. The first commercial oil well in North America apparently began operating in 1858 in the appropriately named Oil Springs, Ontario, though it's said that the first could be the Drake Well in Pennsylvania, as the Oil Springs well had not yet been drilled for oil by the time the Drake Well began operation in 1859. The Drake Well is often considered among the most important, said to have kicked off the country's first oil boom. The structures used to drill oil in Plainview are standard rigs, with walking beams balanced in the center on Samson posts. These walking beams are thought to have been used as far back as the early 1800s in salt wells. They were standardized as part of wooden drilling rigs by the last quarter of the century and were used well into the 20th century, eventually being surpassed by innovations like the pump jack. So their usage in Plainview in 1911 is entirely unsurprising.
St. Homobonus is not looking down on me favorably. Ooh, Homobonus, the patron saint of businessmen.
This is true. Omobono Cecenghi was a merchant of Cremona in Italy, known for his generosity and charity to the poor. He was canonized as Saint Omobonus in 1199, 15 months after his death. He is the patron saint of business people, cloth workers, tailors, and his feast day is celebrated on November 13th.
Well, it looks like a global expansion of your West Dickens elixir might have come a cropper.
This phrase means literally to fall, perhaps especially from a horse. Figuratively, it means to fail. The exact phrasing seems to originate around the mid-1800s. Crop may refer to the top of a head, so the literal phrase means to fall off a horse headlong.
I bet Louis Pasteur didn't have to deal with this shit.
Louis Pasteur was a French microbiologist and chemist, often hailed as a father of microbiology and of bacteriology. He is known for his discoveries, including pasteurization and vaccination, paving the way for modern medicine. His development of vaccines, like for anthrax, cholera, and rabies, have saved millions of lives. More to Dickens's point, some of Pasteur's contemporaries did deal with harassment, like the oft-mentioned Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis, who recommended that healthcare workers wash their hands in obstetrical clinics. He was mocked for it, suffered a nervous breakdown, and was committed to an asylum, where he was beaten and died. It was only years after his death, thanks to the additional findings of those like Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister, that Semmelweis's findings began to be widely accepted.
My old Trojan horse here. What? never mind, sir. I can only presume that you have not enjoyed the benefits of a classical education.
The term classical education can easily have different meanings depending on the context and speaker, though in many instances it refers to liberal arts and sciences and the study of classics. Hence Dickens's usage here, referring to the Trojan horse from classic Greek mythology.
Onwards and upwards! I refuse to let the blind stupidity of the proletariat derail my calling in life.
Proletariat refers to the poorest class of working people, those who sell their labor to earn a living. They were the lowest class of citizens in ancient Rome, the propertyless class, possessing neither capital nor means of production.
You're such a successful businessman. What are you doing living in a cave?
Delightfully Dickensian, isn't it?
Something Dickensian, of course, implies that it resembles something out of the works of English writer Charles Dickens, often evoking the poor working and living conditions of 19th century poverty as depicted and denounced in his novels. After John finishes The Next Race in First, Dickens, that is Nigel West Dickens, not Charles Dickens, celebrates.
He came, he saw, he conquered.
This phrase is a reference to the Latin phrase veni vidi vici, meaning the same thing in first person. It's generally attributed to the Roman dictator Julius Caesar, who apparently wrote the words in a letter after his quick and decisive victory at the Battle of Zela in 47 BC. When John next encounters Seth, the grave robber explains why it's apparently okay that he's got a bunch of dead bodies with him.
They died in that flu epidemic and the bodies weren't even buried yet.
His phrasing of that flu epidemic implies a large or well-known one, though the last major worldwide pandemic up to this point was in late 1889 and early 1890, with recurrences as late as 1895, certainly too late to have any relevance here. The next major one was from around 1918 to 1920, first recorded in Kansas, one of the deadliest in history, leading to tens of millions of deaths. Seth could, of course, be referring to a lesser-known regional seasonal outbreak, especially as he uses the term epidemic rather than pandemic. To help him decide which body to search, Seth sings a little jingle. This is, of course, a very popular children's counting rhyme. One of its precursors was apparently said around the mid-1810s by children in New York, and there are several other old alternatives in other languages and dialects. Another version from later in the century is Eeny Meeny Tipsy Toe. Seth's version, of course, was in use by this time as well. The next mission for Seth is called Let the Dead Bury Their Dead, a reference to Luke 9:60. But he told him, let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and spread the news of the kingdom of God. When Seth finally finds his treasure, he begins to celebrate a little prematurely.
It's silk sheets and Parisian whores from now on, mister!
That Seth associates these with wealth is unsurprising. Prostitution and sex work have a long history in Paris. In 1254, King Louis IX condemned the profession and forbade it in France, though 2 years later this was changed to only impact city centres. There were several developments and alterations to the rules in the hundreds of years that followed, sometimes leaning into tolerance and other times into persecution, including imprisonment. Prostitution was decriminalized by French revolutionaries in 1791, and Paris became more well known for its sex workers. The Palais Royal became a hotspot, a great market of flesh. As for Seth's mention of silk sheets, silk textiles had been considered an expensive luxury or a status symbol for centuries. For a long time in China, its usage was limited only to members of the imperial family. While it wasn't necessarily a rare material, the technology and labor used to produce goods with it, like silk sheets, made it more luxurious. And of course, the lucrative silk trade, among other things, led to the network of trade routes in Asia, East Africa, and Southern Europe, later called the Silk Road. Upon opening the treasure, Seth expresses displeasure at his findings.
The goddamn hell is this? A glass eye?
The earliest known instance of an artificial eye dates back to around 2900 BC. It was discovered in 2006 in Shah-e-Sukhdeh, meaning burnt city, an archaeological site in southeastern Iran, belonging to a woman in her late 20s or early 30s. Glass eyes, meanwhile, date at least as far back as William Shakespeare, who referenced them in King Lear in the early 17th century. It's said that glassmakers in Venice worked on them later in the century, and by the middle of the 18th century, they were being written about more frequently by professionals. In the United States today, artificial eyes are generally made using a synthetic polymer, or occasionally, cryolite. In another mission, John meets Irish in the settlement of Thieves' Landing. As the name suggests, it's an area full of criminals. There are a few real-life examples of such areas, including so-called pirate utopias wherein, according to some possibly fictional accounts, pirates would gather. In the United States, there are cities like Hot Springs, Arkansas, which, while not quite the same, was known for its illegal gambling and connection to well-known mobsters. Perhaps the closest, though still with its differences, is Hole in the Wall in Wyoming, a pass that was home to several outlaws like Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch and the appropriately named Hole in the Wall gang. The geography allowed the area to remain well hidden and easily guarded, perhaps the perfect place for criminals to hide from the law, and a lot less conspicuously named than Thieves' Landing. As usual, Irish says some interesting things throughout this mission.
What the hell's wrong with you, robbing these gentlewomen and ladies of the Lord?
I thought they was doxies.
Another word for a mistress or sex worker.
Motherfucking Mary.
A reference, of course, to Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ.
I've been working like a beaver on your behalf.
This one isn't very complicated either. To work like a beaver means to work hard, just as a beaver does. It apparently dates to at least the mid-18th century and led to the similar term eager beaver, an appropriate label as proven in early 2025, when beavers in the Czech Republic helped to restore a wetland ecosystem, saving the government 30 million Czech koruna, around $1.2 million US.
You've been working like a weasel on my behalf. Bushwhacking defenseless ladies of the cloth?
It's said that a clergyman's cloth, referring to his profession, dates to at least the mid-17th century, and there's a text from the turn of the 18th century in which a woman professes to honour the cloth, that is, to be a parson's wife, a parson being a member of the clergy. Around that time and earlier, a person's cloth sometimes referred to other occupations with special uniforms, like those in the military or law enforcement. In this mission, Irish introduces John to his friend,
Hobble-tongued feller by the name of Shaky.
as implied by his name and confirmed by his speech. To have a hobbled tongue is to have stammering speech, dating to at least the 16th century. Interestingly, some research suggests that stuttering was recognized as far back as ancient Egypt in 2000 BC. Around 2 millennia later, the Roman Emperor Claudius had a stammer, as well as persistent tremors and an unsteady gait, which has led to several diagnosis theories. Some surgical procedures were attempted around the 18th and 19th centuries to cure stuttering, though today it's accepted that the correct approach is treatment and acceptance, not a cure.
This is your last chance, you good-for-nothing shyster.
This is still a fairly common word today, though its origins are a little unclear. It refers to someone whose methods are unprofessional, deceptive, or fraudulent, especially, but not exclusively, lawyers. It was seemingly first published in the 1840s, though one theory claims it was done so mistakenly, claiming that the writer misheard the word for Scheiße, the British slang for a worthless person, seemingly based on the similar German word, but printed it as Scheister, and thus a new word was born.
Come on, time we was making tracks.
And this, of course, means to leave in a hurry. One of the earliest published instances was in the mid-1830s in the Stories of Sam Slick, a story created by a Nova Scotian author and judge. And now, with a Gatling gun in his possession and several new accomplices to call upon, it's about time John makes tracks back to Fort Mercer. In the assault on Fort Mercer, Nigel West Dickens's Trojan horse idea comes to reality. As mentioned before, of course, the legend says that the Greeks left behind a wooden horse, the Trojans took it back into Troy, and later several men crept out from the horse, opened the gates to the city, and destroyed it. A similar technique is used here. Dickens goes to sell his tonics inside Fort Mercer, opens his wagon, and reveals John, who promptly assaults the fort with a Gatling gun. The scene is somewhat similar to one from the 1966 spaghetti western film Django, in which the lead character guns down an enemy gang using a machine gun hidden in a coffin. Before executing their plan, though, Dickens prepares with a few interesting statements.
The moment you hear a sharp rap on the side of the wagon, rise like the phoenix.
A phoenix, of course, is a legendary bird, dating to ancient Greek, Egyptian, and Persian mythology, that is immortal, gaining new life by rising from its ashes. In this context then, Dickens's metaphor is definitely more focused on the rise than the phoenix, as John does rise from the wagon, but not so much with new life gained.
One last time into the breach!
This phrase originates in William Shakespeare's play Henry V, written around 1599, though it's written a little differently. Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more.
I'll be a sitting duck in there.
This phrase, meaning to be a stationary easy target, is also used in Red Dead Redemption 2, set a few years earlier. Interestingly, the first known published usage was in 1944, so more than 3 decades after it's used here. However, a similar phrase, replacing duck with the more generic bird, dates to at least the 1860s, and the common usage of colloquial phrases often predates their first literary publications, so its usage here may not be entirely inaccurate.
Come on in! Come on in! Welcome to my humble abode!
Both of these words are, of course, very standard, and even together they've been used casually for quite some time. But as a specific repeating phrase, often used, at least today, more facetiously, it almost certainly originates in Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice, where it is used several times. Written in the late 18th and early 19th centuries and published in 1813. By the end of this mission, John still hasn't found Bill Williamson, the man he was searching for, because he's escaped to Mexico. So naturally, John also makes his way down there, assisted by Irish, in a mission called We Shall Be Together in Paradise, a reference to Luke 23:43. And he said to him, Verily I shall say to thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. Perhaps also a reference to the name of the Mexican region in the game, Nuevo Paraíso, Spanish for New Paradise. Before he sets off, John bids farewell to Nigel West Dickens.
Thank you. Where are you headed?
Oh, me? London or Paris or maybe Peking.
All well-known cities and logical destinations, though the selection is fascinating. In 1907, 4 years before the game, there was an automobile race known as Peking to Paris, in which 5 teams of 40 entrants raced from Peking in the Qing Empire, now Beijing in China, to Paris in France. It was won by an Italian duo who took 2 months to make the trip. Several reenactments have been held, and while Peking to Paris doesn't mention London, as Dickens does, there was actually a different one-time car rally inspired by it. The London to Peking Motor Challenge, a drive, not a race, that took place from April to May 1990. The way in which John and Irish head towards Mexico is on a hand-operated ferry, that is until they get attacked and let the raft drift downriver. There still is a hand-operated cable ferry on the Mexico-US border, though it didn't actually exist at the time of the game. The Los Ibanos ferry, or El Chalan, was established in 1950, with the current ferry in operation from 1979, and is the last of its kind. The ferry, like the area in Texas on one side of the border, is named after the ebony tree that anchors it. Irish tries to make John more enthusiastic about their destination.
The Mexicans know how to make a bottle of liquor too. What's that, pulque?
He's not wrong about Mexicans and their association with quality alcoholic beverages. Tequila, mezcal, pulque, bacanora, raicilla, they're all well-known drinks that originated in Mexico. They're all products of the agave plant, from which most are distilled. Pulque, however, which Irish names directly, is made by fermenting the sap of some agave species found in central Mexico. It has a long history, having been drunk for over 2,000 years. And its story is intertwined with that of Mexico's mythology.
So off I go to greener pastures.
As Irish likely knows, probably being a Bible-thumping man himself, this phrase developed from Psalm 23:2. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. And so John goes off to his own greener pastures in Mexico. Well, not so green perhaps, but certainly no less interesting, with much to do, many to meet, and lots more history to discuss.